Welcome to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. My name is Rich Kaz, and I will be the guest today. We're going to be speaking about bass and guitar and the music industry in general and how you can get more involved.
Come on, man.
Okay. You guys are obsessed with my pop filter.
I'm not.
Or lack thereof.
I'm surprised you don't have some,
Spit it out.
No,
Spit out my pop filter.
He's going somewhere R-rated with that, I can tell.
Yeah.
Dude, Louis Shortstud's on his way. We're like early into the episode. Whoa! Oh my God! I don't know if Rich knows the tale of Louis Shortstud.
No, that will be for another day. So,
Okay.
you guys, welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott, and today's special guest. Go ahead, Ryan, introduce.
Mr. Richard Kazanjian, otherwise known as
Rich Kaz.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have a nice conversation today, guys. Welcome, Rich. Good
Thank
to
you
see
so
man.
much for having
Yeah.
me.
So everyone should know that Rich is the first bass player we've ever had on the program.
I know. And so we have to expand it. Maybe it's not just rock guitar, or maybe it's rock guitar and bass confidential.
Yes, well, I already apologized to Rich for all the shit we've said about bass players in the previous 83 plus episodes.
Yeah, and from prior to that, the other 25, 30 years of our life before that, too. So that's
Yes.
probably also, atone for that as well.
Indeed, but Rich is also an esteemed colleague in the music industry for many, many years through many incarnations. One of the smartest guys I know, and I can't wait to hear him say things about stuff.
Oh my God! Are you going to do that? Are you going to say things
I'm
about
hoping
stuff?
to.
Oh my God! I didn't know. This is
Okay.
right. I'm going on too. Holy crap!
So there's the introduction. So Rich, tell us all about yourself.
Well, let's see. I've been a musician since the early mid 80s. There's a whole long story about starting out. Of course, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lead singer and a lead guitar player because I wanted the spotlight, right?
Yeah.
But then I spent some time working with some friends in our first bands. The bass player left his bass at my house, and
Nice.
we would sort of jam and rehearse over at my place. And once I started playing, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I liked the size of the strings and the power of the instrument and just the breadth that I could achieve out of that instrument. And so what I would do is I'd go back and forth between guitar and bass. And so I'd come up with a riff somewhere. I'd play it on guitar. I'd get faster at it, and then I'd put it onto bass, and I would get stronger at it. And so I used it as a tool to sort of go back and forth. And honestly, it took me more than a decade for me to really figure out what the ethos of playing bass was about. And then it's a completely different psychology. It's not just fewer strings. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching the instrument and the songs and the music in general.
That makes sense because bass is, part of the rhythm section. I think as a guitar player, you have a little bit more freedom to kind of be more floating over the top or adding secondary parts of the bass, and the drums have got a lot together to make the whole thing solid. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
reinforce the chord progression. They got to reinforce the groove. If there's this, I always tell people, 'cause I teach bass too. I'm sorry, it's a terrible confession.
I own a bass. I own two basses.
But it's a different mindset. I always tell people, if you're a bass player and you're not locked in, it's going to make the whole band just sound sloppy. It's gonna
100%.
sound terrible. So
If I'm playing with a drummer for the first time and I have to look at the drummer at all, I know there's a problem. Like if I have to even look and focus on what are you doing, what's going on, there's some sort of problem. Like we have to have some sort of Bluetooth connection in our heads. And like once that happens, half of my job is already done. Like I play with a couple of drummers, Steve Retta, for example.
Yes.
He and I have been playing on and off for, since 2000 probably.
Yeah, great drummer.
And fantastic
great
drummer.
dude too.
And
yeah,
there
just
are
made me
plenty-
realize that's 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Can you imagine?
Oh my God.
And there are times where I don't know whether his fill is inspired by something I've played or whether my riff is triggered off of his fills. Like it just happens. And that's the beauty of it for me, because I think, at some point, especially as a bass player, you realize there's only 12 notes.
Yeah.
I'm never going to hit a note that no one has never played before.
Oh yeah, we talk about that with guitar all the time.
So it's a question of your approach and whether or not you're fueled by something, and then how your fingers hit the strings and the intention loaded behind it, and all the subtle nuances of, is your finger close enough to the fret, or are you just sort of flubbing your way through it? Like how sharp and how much approach and how strong your attack is. There's all sorts of
Makes
things
sense.
to look at.
I think also like where you play the groove too. Are you slightly ahead of the beat, slightly behind the beat? Are you and the drummer on the same page of how you feel that slower or faster on the beat kind of feel?
Totally.
That's a really important kind of thing you have to have in sync with the drummer you're playing with. If you're always a little bit behind the beat because that's how you feel it, and he's always a little bit ahead of the beat, it's going to always sound weird.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Good point.
Yeah.
For sure. And here's something in my approach that I try and focus on. The day of rehearsal, the day of songwriting, the day that I'm going to be getting together with my guys, I deliberately don't listen to any music prior to the session because I want to clear the mechanism and have as much of a wide open conduit that isn't influenced by other things, so that when the moment comes that we're all in the same room together and we're playing, I've got the clearest sort of transmission line to the notes that I'm going to be playing, because I want to be focused on the notes that the guitar player is playing. I want to know the chords and whether I should hit a fifth or a seventh, or whether I should go other places. Where can I throw a melody in? And if that melody or that rhythm is, for lack of a better way of putting it, influenced by something I heard earlier in the day, that may or may not be as clear a transmission as I want. Now, some people may go the other direction and they want to get as many other influences as possible. But for me, I look at it like I'm trying to be as present with the session or with my guys as possible. So what are they doing, and how do I adapt the best way I can to that?
And it's also
mission?
you. It's not like how would Tony Iommi do this? I kind of think it's more like, no, how do you do that? That's that's the difference.
Yeah,
totally.
Depends on your intent. Like some people, they really almost imagine their parts being like an amalgam of their favorite players' parts,
For sure.
rather than an individual part that they come up with. And that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, some people made fantastic careers doing that. But that being said, if you're kind of I want this to be coming from me. This is going to be something that's original, coming from my point of view. That's exactly the point you want to do.
Totally.
I personally make a point of listening to nothing but Cardi B, so I'm in a shitty mood. Like I'm just the worst. Fucking, why are you playing so shitty? And I do a lot of that, and then it kind of works its way through.
I listen to Post Malone just so
just
that,
not nonstop.
just that, like my confidence is soaring. I'm like, man, I'm good at music.
I'll say, oh, Ryan, dude, you got to check this out. I got this new live bootleg of Pearl Jam. You can really hear the...
No.
You can really hear it. It's amazing, man.
Well, you guys know how it is. If you go into practice mode and you put on a metronome and you're running your scales and you're doing your finger exercises and you're building up your strength, that's a completely different psychology than when you're actually in the room playing. What you want to do is build up all your muscle memory and all your get your chops tight, so that when you're actually in the room, then you can actually play. But if you're trying to confuse the two, it becomes muddied. And so what I do is I'll pull from John Paul Jones, I'll pull from Roger Waters, I'll pull from Simon Gallup and some of these other incredible bass players while I'm living my life in the world, and then trust that when the moment happens, I can randomly pull from these little lines here and there, and that's what'll emerge.
It's going to happen whether you want it or not. Those things just seep through you. It's almost like you're not even consciously in charge of that. That just happens.
Yeah,
you know what I
for
mean?
sure.
Like I was when we were doing takes for the X Stages album. I remember I was playing a solo, and I was like, yeah, that's really more of an Eddie Van Halen solo than it is a Scott Allen solo. You know what I mean? It's like I'm just channeling too much. You know what I mean?
But of course, you don't mind if all my solos are Andy LaRocque solos.
I don't mind, but
that's kind of inevitable.
But what's inevitable to you, though, is you actually are an amalgam of a bunch of. I hear I hear Andy, I hear a bunch of people in your playing. Not just the one person. But that's because that's who you are, though.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And none of those people are Post Malone. So thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm not even sure how. I mean, a lot of Lil Wayne, though, right? You're heavily
yes. Well, Lil Wayne changed my life
for sure. He showed us how it goes. I mean,
right.
So
we've been approaching the instrument the wrong way all
really
these years.
whole time, and he's showed us.
We just needed Lil Wayne to show the way.
Exactly.
I'm a little bit more Biggie Smalls.
Yes.
Have you ever seen the shredding Lil Wayne guitar solo on?
No.
EVH Frankenstein.
He really showed us the Wayne.
I'm still not convinced he really exists. I think he's an AI construct.
You guys can't. If you're listening now, you can't see me face palm.
So you're saying, okay, so if Lil Wayne's an AI construct, then that explains why my NVIDIA stock is crashing today.
There's many reasons.
There's probably many reasons.
We will not get into those reasons, but there are many reasons.
I just if I can blame Lil Wayne, I'll feel a little better.
He's such an innocent, though. I mean, he doesn't know anything. He's just He's just sitting there strumming away on his fiddle, trying to play, and and whatever it is he does. I guess.
Let's ask Dave Chappelle.
Yes, let's. I would love his take.
Dave Chappelle's actually got some serious talent, though.
He does.
Yes.
He's unquestionably the GOAT of our time.
One of the yes.
There's no question about it.
I mean, he's great. No, I don't know. There's some other guys. This is like the Michael versus LeBron conversation. You know, there's
Yeah,
a lot of
I'll
sugar
always
coated,
We could go into
personally-
Bill Burr territory too, but
Yeah.
I just,
I'm a David Cross guy.
Yeah, David Cross is great.
I love David Cross. I had tickets to see David Cross at Harlow's the week of 9/11.
oh,
Was that related? Do you think? Do you think there was something to do? With it?
Well, clearly the Bush administration allowed it to happen,
Yeah,
just to prevent David Cross from getting his message out. Yeah, clearly.
And in the early 2000s, David Cross messages he needed to be heard. He was the spirit of our times at that time. You know?
Yes,
and it was
right.
Exactly.
He was going to get up there and nail it to the cross, and alas.
Jesus.
Quite literally. Yeah.
Boy.
So we veered off into comedy territory here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's my job in the podcast, is to veer everyone off whatever they're on, whatever.
it keeps things exciting.
All right, so let's talk about the music industry now. We talked on the last podcast a lot about how tariffs might affect it and things like that, and I'd love to hear your perspective on where we are and how you've seen the industry change over the last, like, say, 10,
And
15
where do you see
years.
the industry going?
Oh boy, those are all great
we
questions. There's a
doomed?
lot behind there. I don't know if it's doomed. I just think that
But is it doomed?
the rising costs. The rising costs are just going to make it so that the entry level people, the people that are considering getting into music, are going to be like dissuaded from doing so because it's just going to be too cost prohibitive. I remember a time when things like Guitar Hero and Rock Band came out,
Yeah.
and the idea was, well, we'll get these kids playing video games. There'll be music related video games, and then they'll transfer over to actual instruments. And I'm sure that there was a good percentage.
I can
Oh, they did.
attest that they definitely did. Yeah.
But
Yeah, dude, I
also
worked the
think-
sales floor back then, and I sold a ton of
got it.
guitars to kids, and all that great music became relevant again too.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
all
for sure.
classic
People
rock.
knew Eric Johnson, Cliffs of Dover.
Right.
These
For
like
sure.
14-year-olds in like 2008 or whatever it was. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's like, that was surprising.
And I don't know what the percentages have been through that era of people that actually adopted real instruments. But I know there was also a sizable percentage of people that got into the video games and said, well, I got my rocks off, and
Yeah.
so now I don't need to play a real
Yeah.
guitar. And I'm not going to comment on whether that's good or bad so much as, at the end of the day, what I think most of us would want is for people to get into the music business or the music industry or the creation of music,
Just be
because
musicians,
because you get to create. It's a medium by which you can express yourself. And I remember, when I was a kid, I put on headphones and I would play an air guitar and dance close to the record player because I would, I wanted to be. I thought if listening to it. Music makes me feel this good, then the creation of it's got to be even better.
Yep.
And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there's a lot of toil and a lot of it's not the easiest thing in the world.
No,
But I've
becoming a
met
good
some
musician
great
is a very
people.
challenging process, but it's worth it.
For sure,
it's got-
100%, 100% worth it. And I think I've met some great lifelong friends, like you, Ryan,
Thank you.
including
Same.
Without investing in music and the time and all the effort that goes into it. And so back to your question, I think that, while I don't want to see a flood of low quality instruments out there. I do want to see the barrier to entry be lowered so that people can actually get into it and realize how amazing it is, because all we're really trying to do is get a sound to travel from the center of our brain through our body, through these instruments and back to our ears again. And that's the feedback loop that we're really trying to create here. And when you do that with other people, it raises the level of the experience exponentially.
It's funny. I think that we've been living in a time of probably some of the best entry-level instruments I've ever seen in the last maybe 5-10 years. I mean, I was one of my students just purchased a Sterling by Music Man guitar. Not even like a $200 guitar, and I picked up, and fretwork was good. It's
great.
They stayed insulated. It played nice
Yeah.
nag. I mean, there was if you compare that to my $200 guitar back in 1986.
Completely different.
It's
my Memphis
that's like a real guitar. The one that my student just bought. The one I got was a piece of plywood that was something slapped on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
plywood body, and it had a streak of green wood in the headstock.
Which is why it's so tragic that these tariffs
Yep.
are hitting, and especially the Chinese tariffs, and then to a lesser degree the Mexican-made stuff. Because the Mexican-made is more the mid-range stuff, like the AVH Jackson, kind of 300,
Like upper mid-range, yeah.
300 to like 800 range-ish range. So that's going to hurt that. But the Chinese stuff's where all the really cheap stuff comes from. All the companies make their cheap cheapest stuff in China, Hong Kong, Indonesia.
Yeah, like the BCP guitars.
Well, no, but I'm talking about like Ibanez low-end guitars, like Squiers, the Sterling brand, Music Band stuff. That stuff's all made in China primarily.
Right,
you know what I mean? And that's going to be what sucks, because that guitar that was $199 for my student who had this great experience is not going to be $400.
Yeah,
that's right. You know what I mean? That's
Dude,
something that we just did. You know what I mean? It's
maybe if there's like a bright side, maybe it'll be the death of the Amazon guitar.
Yeah, that could be also, and this is something that we don't really talk about that often, which is that sometimes the higher dollar figure that makes you want or cherish that instrument a little bit more. Like if I could buy a new guitar every couple of weeks for $200, how much am I going to care about that instrument?
Right.
But if I have to spend $600 on an instrument, I'm going to care about it.
Yeah, dude, I took out my first credit card to buy my Brian Moore C55 over there at Skips. I was supposed to merchandise it, and I opened the case, took one look, closed the case, took it back to the warehouse, applied for a credit card, and bought it.
Yep.
Right. And I love that guitar. Yeah, and you play it more. Like I know I became a better player with that guitar.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll never forget the first nice guitar I ever bought. Actually, you sold it to me, Ryan. It was my
you're welcome.
RG3120 Prestige, Japanese made Ibanez. I remember thinking like that guitar. That was my main guitar from 2000 to like 2006.
Yeah.
That was my main guitar. So that, and then I was, I remember that same feeling like, man, this is not a mid-range. This is like a serious guitar. This is my main body. It's like, hell yeah.
Sure. Rock solid.
I got it through almost the whole day before I put my first chip in it.
And to your point, Ryan, I want to veer it back to this. The death of the Amazon guitar. I mean, no disrespect to Amazon or any of these other retailers. I just think that, of all the items that I've bought in my life, I couldn't tell you where I got my microwave or my blender or whatever, but I can tell you where I got each one of my instruments, and there's a connection involved in that.
Yep.
And I just think that it's really important that people go out and shop and go to places that they feel comfortable in, that they have knowledgeable salespeople that could guide them through the process. Because, and I've said this in some of the business development classes I've done, is when someone thinks that they have their job nailed, they may not. In other words, if you think you're just a guitar salesman, you are not just a guitar salesman.
That's right. There's a little bit of Dunning-Kruger in that, I think.
Totally.
But, if you're a good, I mean, it's, the whole reason humans even invented culture is so that we can not feel alone and so that we don't, suffer from death anxiety.
That's right.
Right? So, it's all about building community, right?
Totally.
Like most of my best friends, right? Like you guys and countless other people are people that I met because I was the kid working the guitar floor.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And then as a teacher, like all my friends are my students.
And this is, what's in my space around all this is really a call out to not just independent music stores, but retail in general. I have heard for decades, the internet's killing retail, and that's not true. I think there's an ingredient of that there, but I think retail is often killing retail more than internet is, because if we hire, and for lack of a better way of putting it, substandard or not engaged salespeople who aren't interested in building the culture, you're going to transfer that lack of enthusiasm to the end user.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but sales is the transfer of enthusiasm.
Confidence, For sure. And so, when someone says, well, I just sell guitars for a living. No, you don't. And I'll tell you why. Because for me, I'm a bass player, but I have baritone guitars. I've got standard guitars. I'm a cyclist. I like computers. I like electronics. I like video games. I like cooking. There's a million things that could hemorrhage my money out at any given moment. So at the end of the day, at the end of the month, after all my bills and all the other stuff is paid, how much money do I have at the end of the month? Now that varies for other people. So the question becomes, where are they going to spend their money, and in what format are they going to spend their money? If they go to a music store and the person at the end there has gives them a really good experience, maybe they'll buy another pedal the next month. Maybe they're going to invest in their craft a little bit more. And so really the punchline here is that if you think you're just a guitar salesman, you are not. You are actually a customer acquisition and customer retention specialist. And it just so happens that musical instruments are the vehicle by which you use to develop that clientele. Because what you want to do is capture mind share, and you want to focus that mind share on how amazing it is to make music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
that's true. Because essentially, if you have the vibe that I don't care about you or you're annoying me by asking these questions, then that person's going to not only not buy something, they're not coming back and then tell their friends what a crap experience they had.
Right.
Those people are dicks. So why would you
Yep.
in there?
Or if your attitude is like, okay, you're interrupting me from whatever it was I was
really
doing.
instead of
That's
how
better
can I-
than
how can I help you? It's more like, well, what the fuck do you want?
Yeah,
That's the attitude. You know what I mean?
If Amazon or eBay is a better salesman than you, then you need to get out of the game.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
zero impact versus what you're doing is negative impact.
Totally.
You know?
And furthermore,
That's right. Yeah.
that's right.
Take that.
You know what? Like the music's not always the jocks, right? Like if you personally care at all about doing anything good in the world or for someone else, like the positive impact that you can have on other people, either working the sales floor or being a teacher. And in that environment it's huge, right?
For sure.
The kids that were starting bands in high school, they're like the island of misfit toys, right?
Totally.
It's certainly being like a metal kid, right? Metal's for
Not so much when we were
the powerless
kids.
to feel powerful.
When we were kids,
and
it was
build
more
relationships,
popular.
yeah.
Though. Like now, you're really the weird kid. Now
It was,
Yeah.
but like I definitely started out as I survived 9 years of bullying in Catholic school.
Wait, we
right?
never talked about this. Are you kidding me?
I know, right? Yeah, totally.
Can I share with you a brief epiphany?
Please.
When I was a kid, I listened to Def Leppard and I listened to a lot of this, good hair metal rock, whatever you want to call it.
Hell yeah, dude.
And then, of course, when I got into be a teenager, I had been listening to a lot of The Cure and the Smiths and Depeche Mode, and I listened to a lot of new wave and what we called then progressive. But
Man, I saw a great Cure tribute band. I got to tell you all about.
Yeah,
after
okay,
this.
please. And being bullied in school was commonplace because you're wearing black clothes and your hairspray and makeup. The jocks were relentless. I don't know how many times I was pushed into or shoved into a locker or whatever. But eventually, I go on tour with Tesla as a guitar tech and stage manager, and I spent a few years with them. Great guys, by the way. And we did a number of runs with Def Leppard, and who are fantastic guys. Like if I could choose some of the best people I've ever seen in the industry, it would be Def Leppard, it would be Cheap Trick, Joan Jett. There's a handful of people that are really awesome.
All the more impressive considering how successful all those artists
Totally.
are.
And I've got a great Joan Jett story for you, but we'll take it offline maybe. But anyway, after being in that sort of scene and sort of being made fun of and chastised and all that, I got to witness The Cure being inducted into the Hall of Fame the same year that Def Leppard was included as well.
Which is way too late, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. But it was confirmational. It was like, see, this music is a cross-genre experience. It doesn't matter whether you're playing a djembe or whether you're playing a flute or whether you're playing a rock, like heavy metal guitars. It's a question of how it resonates with people. And ultimately, like I said earlier, there's only 12 notes. At some point, we're all going to be laughing at each other for how we micro-analyze each genre. And it's just music at the end of the day.
It's a good thing that could never happen in metal.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
What's also so funny is like if you look at those bands we talk about, like the Def Leppards and like let's say the Cheap Tricks and stuff, and you look at a band like The Cure, there's not a giant chasm between those artists. Even though one's more rock and then one's more pop.
Right.
But if you look at the way it is now, the chasm between what we consider rock music and what we consider pop music couldn't be bigger. You know what I mean? Anything that's remotely listenable is not even considered metal anymore. It can't be listenable. It can't be hooks or melodies.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if you look at that and you compare it to like, say, Dua Lipa or something like that. But listen, before it's like Whitesnake, Def Leppard to The Cure, Duran Duran, that wasn't a giant chasm. It was like a little more rock, but it wasn't like a giant chasm.
I'll just throw a caveat on the metal can't be melodic unless you're in Japan.
Well, or you're playing power metal or something like that. But like in America, we think of as metal as kind of the Lamb of God kind of style of metal.
It's got to be
that
super testosterone fuel. That's what happened. Yeah, that's what happened like post grunge apocalypse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite metal bands. Period.
When metal bands came back, though, but that not known for their tuneful, tapping anthems, though.
But oddly enough, one or both of their guitar players are very blues influenced.
Yeah, Mark Morton.
So they really insert that into their.
I found that so heartbreaking, though. I'll be honest, because I'm a person who I graduated from music school in the late '90s, right at the perfect time.
Wah, wah.
And then you know, as I was getting into the world, like putting out records and stuff like that, I remember when the metal bands, and then my students would come in with these like new metal. I'm like, oh my god, these bands are shredding, hell yeah! And I would like get into like bands like Killswitch Engage or Trivium and Lamb of God around this time, Children of Bodom, you know, that kind of thing, Dragon Forest. And I remember like, cool, but where's the songs? Like, where's the hooks? Where's the melodies? There's cool riffs. There's cool solos. Like Born of Osiris. There's kind of bands like they're really good bands. If there was no vocals, I'd be way into them.
So you're making the case against the growling vocals.
The growling vocals with no melody. That's the thing. There's no melodicism to that music. There's like there's melodicism in like the riffing, but there's not melodicism in the vocals. You know what I mean?
Japan.
Well, yes, Japan does it right, but I mean, we're talking about American metal though. Like the American metal, they kind of lost the melody thing. If you look at a band like Whitesnake or Def Leppard or Bon Jovi, Poison, you know, L.A. Guns, Guns N' Roses, those bands were all tuneful. They're all
well, rock music isn't mainstream
anymore. I would also make the argument, and this is maybe a throwback, but you know, once we started pulling music education out of schools, we started training our people to think
mechanically.
I should say we removed the ability to that's right. Like they didn't have any reference point. So you know, like the Whitesnakes of the world, and you know, some of these, for lack of a better way of putting it, pop or popular mainstream rock acts. You know, they came from it's in their DNA to have melodic structure. Now we don't even. It's not like that. We're distilling music down to these like grunts and you know, outbursts and where we do find a lot of melody is in hip hop and rap, and even then, those are mostly like nursery rhyme hooks.
And look at like pop, modern pop, like the Dua Lipas, the Sabrina Carpenters of the world. Then that's basically
you know what?
only melody and like no harmony.
Although I will say, I probably said this on a previous episode, but I had
Sabrina Carpenter's really hot. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, right. No, so I asked my teenage student, like, you know, dude, what are you listening to? And he's like,
is it what? I'm sorry.
Like, he didn't want to tell me.
So after he walked out of the bathroom stall, he showed you. He goes, I don't know. Nothing. What? Why are you interrogating me, man? This isn't. I'm not on trial. What the hell?
He's like, well, Sabrina Carpenter. I like it because she's hot. Yeah. And I was like, dude, that's a great reason. Let's check it out. So he watched the video.
Same reason I'll stop and watch a Dua Lipa video too.
And you know what?
Right.
And you know, Espresso's got a cool little like Latin sounding melody in it, and then it's like a cool like, you know, like a 2/5 groove.
But there's like no harmony though. There's no like song. There's not like a bridge, and then there's like another like an instrumental section. There's like nothing.
It has no structure. Yeah, it's just the same thing for like 3 minutes.
What kills me is like, how did 12 writers for this song
for 2 chords or 3 chords?
How do you guys have a job?
It's a drum loop because there's no dynamics in the drumming at all. It's just
So I distinctly remember pop music being better back in the 80s.
This is what I was going to point. I was actually teaching a student of mine the other day a couple of things.
Here we go.
Things
were better when they were worse.
I know. Right?
I was teaching some Police the other day. I was teaching Message in the Bottle by the Police.
There you go. The hand crank song.
And I was like, going, okay, now look at this. Now I tried to stop my students and say, look, this is pop music. This is compare the pop music of like 1987 to the pop music of now. Look at the musicianship in this and compare it to the musicianship of now. You know what I mean?
So how about well, so when I think 80s pop music, like what about Madonna?
Okay, Madonna, at least there's still chord changes, and they had people like Steve Lukather playing guitar on those records, and they had like people like, and they also had people like Jeff Porcaro playing drums on that stuff. You know what I mean? And I mean, so you had like amazing musicians, but that was expected then. Like you couldn't suck. Even in the 90s, as much as I hate most of the 90s, I love bands like Goo Goo Dolls. I think that bands like that, Collective Soul, those bands were actually real musicians who played real music. You know what I mean? It's,
if you say so.
Dude, trust me. I've taught and played enough Goo Goo Dolls in my life to have the respect for those guys.
Better you than me, man.
Thank you, very much.
Yeah, definitely,
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. But hey, I've espoused PJ Harvey many times on this podcast, so the 90s weren't all garbage. Anyway,
compare that to Dua Lipa.
Which, by the way, was also a great band, Garbage. Great.
Yeah, they actually, I can get behind Garbage.
Yeah.
Shirley Manson gets the shout out.
That's going to sound bad out of context.
And Butch Vig, are you kidding me? Butch Vig.
I haven't forgiven Butch Vig for Nirvana.
Oh God.
I don't know. Yeah. We have to like really have some therapy sessions together.
Okay. Thank God that the only thing
but that's okay. I don't want to veer into grunge apocalypse.
Okay. Well, we can't help it. That's part of the DNA of this podcast.
I know our listenership is
Thank God for Dream Theater, else I would not made it through the 90s. That's all I can say. You know what I mean? It's that's the only band that got me through the 90s. That
I don't know. Killing Joke got me through the 90s pretty well.
Well, Killing Joke's not bad.
Right.
For sure.
I mean, they didn't have the greatest melodic content, but my God, Jordy was an amazing guitar player. player.
Yeah.
Supple in his wrist, but ferocious sound. Like he had this huge Gibson hollow body, and it sounded like the fucking apocalypse was coming. Sorry, if you want, you can bleep that out if you want to. But
No, that's great. You can swear all the fuck you want.
Amazing guitar player. So I was really influenced by that kind of stuff.
As someone who was weaned on Steve Vai and Evan Malmsteen and Eddie Van Halen and George Lynch, the 90s were incredibly depressing.
You know what? During the 90s,
That's all I could say.
you know, in the 90s, like I just felt like there was a split. If I wanted to play like heavy guitar, I had to play like a super aggressive, like on the edge of death metal type project.
Yeah.
But I also listened to then I started listening to a bunch of new wave stuff. Like I got deep into New Order, and that was the time of my life when I was listening to The Cure, The Smiths.
Yeah.
Like
Peter Hook was a major influence on me.
Yeah, Peter Hook's amazing.
Major.
Yeah. And New Order itself is just such a great bespoke, like perfect, like source of art.
There's interesting chord changes going on in a lot of that music too. It's
For
not,
sure.
You know, I mean,
and Peter Hook is a great study in melodic bass playing. I want to bring him back to that for a second.
Yeah, he plays like a guitar player.
For sure. And a lot of his lines are that way. In fact, we went through this exercise in the band that I'm in, Noose, that I've been in for...
Well, talk about
Which we need to hear all about.
Okay, so the band is called Noose, N-U-S, and it's got a little umlaut over the U.
Yes,
and
we
you
love
can find us
umlauts.
That's
on
so
Instagram.
sophisticated. Oh my God.
It's a little art, which is...
I love it. I love umlauts.
So the brief story is that we made a couple records in the mid-'90s with Grammy-winning producer named Bill Laswell, who's a legend in the bass community. He actually won his Grammy for producing Herbie Hancock's Rocket, which is one of those songs that sort of broke hip hop and street culture into the mainstream. But he's done everything from Miles Davis remixes to just he's played with John Zorn, and he's played with he has a band called Painkiller that had Dave Lombardo in it. I mean, like he's a very wide ranging kind of guy. And we took a break. All of us went on to different paths. The singer Percy Howard went on to play with Vernon Reid and a whole bunch of other people.
I love Vernon Reid so much.
And now we're all back together. We're making music and we're writing a new album. But that's been really taken up a lot of my creative time. But when I first started playing with Noose, like I was really influenced by the Peter Hooks of the world. And I started actually, this is a good little rabbit trail. Like what really got me started in playing bass, I purchased an old Proverb by Art, one of those rack units, single effect at a time, that kind of thing. And there was a particular delay patch on there. And I was, really heavily listening to a lot of Pink Floyd and a lot of the delays. And so there was a lot of U2 and Big Country that was in my space at the time,
Big Country, underrated band.
Totally underrated. Tony Butler,
underrated.
an amazing bass player.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, so powerful. And I finally got to meet him a while ago, and he was amazing. Anyway, having effects and a delay pedal or some sort of rhythmic, a delay helped me hone my timing, because a delay pedal is unforgiving. If you make a mistake, it will remind you of it over and over and over.
However long that goes
for sure. So for me, taking those influences from new wave and that whole movement and incorporating it into my own style of playing really helped focus me on timing, because I didn't have a drummer at the time, and so and I didn't even really have a metronome. So the delay pedal became my metronome, and then that ended up becoming part of my voice. And years later, people would come up to me and have you heard Justin from Tool? Well, yeah, a lot of those choruses and delays that he's been using, that comes from a whole lineage that many of us, myself included, I'd like to say, have been employing that voice for years, because it's different than your typical bass playing sounds.
Well, for bass forever it was just like, okay, we'll just get a direct signal. There you go. There's your
sound.
That's right.
That's right. And I'm a little unorthodox about that. And
it's not the coolest sound ever. I mean, oh my God,
But I eventually went on to play with an R&B band for a number of years, and when you're in an 8-person R&B band where the songs are kind of laid out, you have a very specific space to live in. You listen to a lot of Tower Power, and you listen to a lot of this stuff that requires you to be a lot more disciplined.
Tight.
That's when I really learned how to be a bass player. I mean, everything else prior to that was creative and very interesting and fun, but when I really learned how to focus my psychology of being a bass player was in King Bradley Fisher. Amazing band, great singers. We played at Harlow's and upstairs of the Momo Lounge all the time. And that's where I really learned how to think like a bass player.
Nice. Well, that's good information for me through picking up bass. That's such an important thing. It's a different mindset. Guitar is such a different mindset than playing bass, and that's something a lot of people think. If I play guitar, of course I can play bass. Whatever, pick up bass. Who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the bass is the bridge between the drummer and the melodic instruments. You know
it
what
can
I mean?
be the
so you got to
foundation.
kind of.
I mean, it's,
You have to be kind of both, right?
for sure.
You know?
And Jaco, he's referenced in just about every bass conversation,
of course,
for obvious reasons.
Yep.
But he was a big proponent of learn everything, learn the melody, learn all the chord changes, learn everything that there is about that particular piece, so you can decide where you're going to go in your playing. Because if I hit a fifth, or I hit a seventh, or I make a melodic run where there's a little hole for me to do so, that's going to change the temperature of the whole song.
Well, that could become the hook line to the song.
Totally.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? That's 100%. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
On a completely separate note, I just when you said that, the thing I thought about was the intro to Paradise City by Guns N' Roses.
Oh, totally.
The little bass line, bum, 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 dum, that kind of thing.
Oh,
That's
yeah, totally
Now you
makes
can't
the
even
song.
imagine it without that part there.
That's right.
If you
Yes.
don't have that little bass line, I'm sure Duff was just playing it in the studio, and it's one of the takes, and they say, "Oh, that's cool." Let's get that.
for sure.
You know what I mean?
For
It's-
sure.
Or like the bass line in "I Can't Wait" by Ex Aegis.
That's true. Which is written by
Yes.
yours truly.
Yes, well, yes, which I stole from "Boogie in
the
Your Butt" by Eddie Murphy.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Now back to the show.
But
your
that was
butt,
Rick
right?
James.
It's
So
not-
I really ripped off Rick James.
If you pull out John Paul Jones from Ramble On, you have a completely different song.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Or even Heartbreaker. People don't think about that very much, but like the little lines in Heartbreaker. Are
Dude,
like,
the only thing that made Them Crooked Vultures interesting was John Paul Jones. I remember first seeing those guys on Saturday Night Live, and just I heard it and thought, oh, that's John Paul Jones.
Yeah.
Right, before I even saw it on the TV. Yeah.
And then you look at a guy like Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick. I mean, the guy pioneered like 12-string basses.
Oh, yeah,
So,
right.
Like
Doug Pinnick, 12-string bass.
Doug
Man.
Pinnick's got the best bass tone I've ever heard.
Oh, my
His
God.
bass tone's unbelievable.
Yeah. And a matter of fact, that album Dogman holds up a million years
Oh,
later.
yeah.
You just put it on right now, and I'm telling you, it's incredible. It's mixed well. The performance is amazing, and it sounds like it was recorded an hour ago.
Yeah.
Right, totally.
Well, it's amazing we have incredibly talented musicians. What can happen?
Yeah, Ty Tabor also.
Yeah.
Ty Tabor,
Ty was an amazing
underrated guitar player.
Underrated.
Yeah.
And he's
Underrated.
incredible, dude. Everybody knows how great Ty is. I mean,
Well,
he's not,
more people need to
he's
know
not
how great Ty
as famous
is.
as
Yeah.
like Vi or something like that, but he's respected, man. There's not too
Solid.
many bands you get mentioned that get instant respect from everybody faster than King's X.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
For
But
sure. And
so
they deserve it.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, a 12-string bass is actually like a 4-string bass, but it's 3 courses per string.
Yeah, it's 3 sets of it's
4 sets of 3
4
strings.
sets of 3.
Similar to like a 12-string guitar in the sense that you fret them at the same time. And
Yeah,
that's
so
it.
you'll have your primary string and 2 sympathetic strings.
exactly.
And then I also have a 10-string bass, which is 5 sets of 2.
That makes
God,
sense.
how do you play that?
With my big monkey paw.
Hell yeah.
That's why.
Nice.
It's really more of a conversation piece. You just put it on the wall and say, "Hey, look
Yeah, I've always admired, people who can actually operate a 12-string bass. I am impressed.
It's a lot. And you know what? Sometimes I'll use it just as a strength builder because I want to get the clarity of the notes and not have it just be this wash of clanks, you know?
Right.
And
Wash of Clanks.
That's
That'd be a
great
good band name.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
okay,
right.
we're going to put that in
We
our
are.
pocket.
We're there.
Yep.
Yeah, because I want that strength building and I want to be able to hit the notes. And then by the time I get onto a regular 4 or 5 string, I'm flying.
Yeah.
So
I wish more producers understood what you're talking about because it's like I said, the bass tone has always been thought it's like an afterthought. It's like, yeah, we got a DI. There you go. There's your tone. It's like,
Right.
no, I want to bring a cabinet in and let's start. No. Yeah.
Well, and the challenging thing about it for me is that and I think you guys understand this when you're dialing in a guitar tone. It may sound great in your rehearsal hall. It may sound great through your cans, but then when you get everyone else's frequencies involved, now you have to do a whole lot of adjustments because it's not the same. You know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always dialed my tone in like probably with a little more high mids and treble than like you would think.
Yeah.
But because that cuts in a band situation.
Right.
You know,
all that
but
bass
it's-
isn't going to help you, and also makes it harder for the mixing engineer to do anything with it. Too.
That's right.
And
It's
that's
not
why
bedroom. I love a good presence knob.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's really important for young bands who are coming up to show up early to the gigs, to make good friends with the sound guy, buy him or her food and drinks, and take care of them, because they are going to ultimately make you sound good or bury.
Well, they do have the suck knob, the suck buttons right there.
Totally. Totally.
Yes,
I remember, and Ryan, when we first met, I was training for, well, at the time I was training for MIT, I think.
MIT, yes. Right. Okay, so was there anything in that little plastic box on the cable?
Yeah. There was electronics, but where I really cut my teeth was from Monster cable, right? Because when Monster in the 90s and early 2000s, amazing product. I still have a lot of the cables that I used back then that I'm still using today.
Now, people should know that Monster cables were like a high-end cable, kind of a custom shop kind of cable.
Yeah, I sold a lot of 18-foot cables for $100 a pop.
Yeah, and at the time, that's a tremendous amount of money. And
late 90s, early 2000s.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I would even talk to drummers to say, listen, here.
Wait, you talked to a drummer? Oh my God.
I know.
Are you okay, man?
How'd it go?
Was it okay?
How did they respond? With just grunts? Or?
Is it mostly aggression? A lot of just like dragging the
semaphore. Sign language, right? Yeah. No. Hey, they're my homies, man. They're like,
I know. That's why we tease. That's why we tease.
They can't read. They don't listen to podcasts. Don't read.
Right. They're technophobes. I get it.
They're not going to find you.
No, but I would even talk to drummers about like why you need to be selling cables and why you need to be up on your game as far as your gear goes. You're not just setting up shells and cymbal stands. You have to make it easy for the sound guy, so that if they're plugging in a dozen cables for your whole rig, for all the mics that are on your kit, like, you need to make it easy for them, because if you do that, then they're going to want to book you more. So every step of the way is important if you think about it. Now, some people get into the music industry or just to play because I want to play rock and roll and I want to get hammered and I want to get chicks or whatever the story is.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard that.
Which is super fun. But if you really get into the part of your craft, you need to look at each step of it, not just practice, not just songwriting, not just rehearsal, which, by the way, are all three different experiences inside the room. But also when you go to play the gigs, like if you are filling up gas like half a block away from the venue, you better be on your game, because people are going to see you and either think that you're cool or you're not. Like, in other words, if you're mean to the person who you're filling up gas with at the store, like if the way that you present yourself is going to have effects downstream. And so when you get to the venue, be cool with your sound people, be cool with your bartenders, show up, do your job well, and kick ass. And then you create an environment where they're gonna want you to come do that again. And if your goal is to play more often, you got to be cool every step of the way, and then you'll get more opportunities.
That actually brings me to something I want to talk about, which is the future of live performance and like the live club experience kind of thing, which it feels to me like has been, since COVID, has been really kind of being strangled out.
Totally.
To the point where there's very few venues to play, and at least to play at a high level. There's like back in the day, there was like 5, 6, 7 venues in Sacramento area that you could play. There were decent sized places you could play. Now it feels like there's a bunch of really small places, couple pretty big places, and then there's some places you don't want to play. And
there's an economic reason for that. I mean, like, most venues are going to want to book either a DJ or a cover band. Why? Because they're guaranteed money. Right? If you're going to open your doors and you're going to bring in X amount of people, those people better be drinking, because that's what's going to carry their costs. I mean, I run a restaurant right now because...
Please tell us all about it.
Okay, so I'll briefly tell you a little bit about it. It's a place called V's Paradise Restaurant in Old Sacramento. It's on the corner of Front and J Street. It occupies the former building of Fat City. This is an enormous endeavor. We actually have both buildings, not only on Front and J, but right next to it, which used to be called California Fats, and before that, in the 70s, it was called China Camp, and it was all owned by the Frank Fat family. So the people from Fat's Asian Bistro, and of course Frank Fat's. And I can tell you through looking at margins and looking at numbers that we get by with our food. But alcohol is where people make the bulk of their money, because that's a in other words, like the bread and eggs and meat and all the other things, the food, that has a finite shelf life. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Right? Makes sense.
But a bottle of Bacardi is going to stay for God knows how long, as long as you don't overheat it and all that other stuff.
So you have to keep bringing in fresh product all the time. You can actually buy it or ship it, and it's going to be there for 2 months or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So when you look at the club environment where the rest of us want to play, the club owner is looking at it like, okay, what kind of draw do they have? How many people are going to be coming through the door? And of those people, how many of them them are going to be drinking.
Yeah.
And so how do I keep my place open? And if I'm going to dedicate a night or 2 or 3 nights to live bands, they better have a draw, or else I'm going to go under.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they ever since COVID, they're looking at it even more with more scrutiny.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, a lot of
I'll-
the clubs have gone out of business. I mean, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's,
You can.
And I'll add, that draw can be. That draw is not dependent on the quality of the cover band, right?
or the band in general.
There's a bunch of, I hate to say, how do I put this? A bunch of recreational musician friend bands out there. They'll bring all of their adult retiree friends out to have a bunch of beers and everything, but the band's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those, right? So like the whole cover band, like unless you're like in an elite, like playing corporate events cover band, then all the other cover band gigs are getting sucked up by just the recreational
For sure.
cover band, right?
And I think if any one of us were to open up a club, at some point we're going to, really lean into the idea that if I'm going to open up my club for a band or bands, I want to have fun. I want it to be a scene, and I want to make money.
Yep.
Those are the things that they're really leaning on. And so, if you as an upcoming band want to get in a little deeper, you got to bring your own scene or know how to create one, and then you got to have a fun time while you're there, and then you got to be able to make them some money.
Yep.
If you can't do those things, you're probably not going to get booked very often.
The thing I'm noticing, though, is that the idea of there being a live music scene that everyone kind of shows up for and supports is kind of dwindling. I'm not noticing that at all. Like even back when I first started playing gigs back in the late 90s, there was people who would just come out to see the bands, the original bands especially. And then now it feels like there's, wherever you see a show, and the shows I've been associated with, other bands on the bill are just their friends coming to see them.
Yeah,
play.
right.
It's not like there's people who's showing up to go see the bands. There are people who are friends of that band, and everyone comes to see the band that they're friends with, and then they leave after.
Right.
So it's not like there's people just coming in, like 200 people on the Saturday, every Saturday
For
to
sure.
see the bands. That was a thing in the 80s. That is not a thing now.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. But it's also worth mentioning that this is also seen through the lens of the city that we're in.
Yeah.
And if you go to, Austin or if you go to Nashville, there's rows of venues, and there's people. That is what they do culturally.
Yeah, it's kind of like what the 80s Sunset Strip was.
Yep,
exactly.
But those are a couple of cities. Throw Los Angeles in there, I guess.
No,
you don't think
throw
so?
Los Angeles in there. No.
Really?
LA is just as bad as Sacramento.
LA is just as bad as Sacramento. Well, in that case, there's a couple of very special places like Nashville where that's part of the culture.
That's right.
And same with Austin too.
For everyone else who's living in a regular city like we do.
Yeah, most other places,
it's a challenge.
Chicago, New York, that's really similar to here. You know what I mean? And the way it's set up. Unless you're a touring band that's got a nice draw, like you're saying, you're playing a mid-sized club. Those guys do okay. But all the bands who are like the trying to break in bands are fucking screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you can really work social media and somehow get a lot of people out to your shows, and you have some kind of kooky thing about you that brings everyone out and have to see this.
And
it's the days of just going out and grinding out at like 6 sets, at some place. And
I know.
people, those days are over, man.
And see, I fear
with
that with there's also in macro, right? Like there's no more, if you're a kid, a teenager, there's no more growing up to be a rock star.
No.
Like there aren't those anymore.
Rapper and
like,
Well, yeah,
that's it, right?
and you see that as evidenced by the top 40, top 100.
Right.
There are very few bands, if any at all, right now in those lists, and I just think that up and coming artists who like to play music need to start getting a little bit more savvy about how they develop their crowd, how they import it into these clubs, and really pitch the club owners on, we're going to throw a party and it's going to be a lot of fun and I'm going to make you some money.
And that's also tough for the artist too, because now there's we talked
now
about,
they have to be a marketer too.
Well, they have to be a marketer, and then there's so we've talked about this on a previous episode of the podcast, but on Hulu there's a documentary about Tegan and Sarah.
Okay.
Which, love Tegan and Sarah. Be great to have them on the program sometime.
Absolutely.
But I guess something happened where one of them picked up a stalker that then assumed her identity, and to make a long story short, they were very available to their fans, and that's how they built their fan base, right? Like at the merch booth after every show,
Well, you have to do that. That's just the way it is.
Yeah,
you know
you
what I mean?
have to.
There's
You
no,
have to do that, right? And
There's no like I'm going backstage and that one and that one bringing back. That doesn't exist anymore.
So
hasn't existed for 25, 30 years. You know what I mean?
So cheers to Chapel Rowan for rejecting that a little bit and like maybe finding some equilibrium. But if I were a kid, but if I were a kid who was coming up, like I wouldn't know what to do.
Well, you just do it because you love music. I think that's what it comes down. I think the problem with what you're saying though is that what about those artists who it's not about a party? They're kind of an off-center kind of artist, kind of thing. So those guys would still need to have, this isn't going to be a party. This is going to be like more of an introverted thing.
No, I get it.
And that kind of thing. So that kind of excludes.
Well,
those
they
kind of
become
artists.
YouTubers.
I guess so, but that's one of those things where everyone can't be doing YouTube channels all the time.
For sure.
Well, literally everyone can,
but what you're saying really resonates with me right now, because if I look at the band that I'm in, Noose, we have a legacy of really solid material that may to some people be a little bit esoteric, but who we are right now and what we're writing is a lot more accessible than it used to be, because all of us have got decades more experience than we did when we started, and we've had a lot of different genres that we've worked within. But there is a Venn diagram where we all meet, and where that is fundamentally a little bit different sonically than it was when we were recording in the 90s. But to your point, if you're not like about a party scene and all that, I think what you really have to do, my gut tells me that you just have to double down on the things that you're really good at, make that the thing that you do and own it, and then get serious about maybe even bringing in some like family members or outside eyes, because once you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to be objective.
Yeah, you can't be objective.
So, maybe looking at, well, what genres or what other people, like right now, we're looking at, people in the poetry crowd. We're looking at people in spoken word. We're also looking at just different demographics and
maybe comedy, right? Like comedians are the new rock stars.
Right. Well, that's funny. I've got a great comedian friend of mine, Jason Ressler, who spent years on that scene, and both of us were sitting down talking one time, and he was like, you guys have it much easier than we do. And I was like, what are you talking about? I said, the place is full. He goes, yeah, but they don't want to hear the same jokes every day. Like, they want to hear that same song every day, but they don't want to hear the same jokes every day. I said, wow, that's right. And we started talking about it, and like, it's funny how most rock stars want to be comedians and most comedians want to be rock stars. It's so funny how that works. The bottom line of what I'm trying to say is that we just have to get a little bit more diverse in the way that we think about how to market our material, and we have to create different reels that speak to the different sort of crowds and the different aspects of what we think we're doing to bring in more people to do it. And we're looking at things like art shows and book houses and all sorts of private parties, something that isn't necessarily club alcohol based. And then as you grow that crowd, then you can export that to another place.
Yeah, I should probably mention too that even though it's more challenging on the live front than it's ever been, there's never been a time where there's more tools at your disposal to market yourself for free or close to free in the history of humanity.
That's
you know what I mean? So that's something that you just have to. And I think that the challenge for that I found is keeping up with it. Because every 20 freaking minutes, it's something new. It's like, that's not cool. This is the new thing. And you got to be on this. Like, what is, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm a little bit old school as far as this stuff goes. Like, I just want to play. I just want to play.
That's not part of the job description anymore, though. You have to do all of it. You know what I mean?
You know what? My chop for the past 20 some odd years has been that I'm an artist that got seduced into sales and marketing. That's what happened. And it's like a lifeboat. You have to have it or else. Because just being a good musician, just being a good artist is not going to get you out in front of people.
Yeah. Or even if you have a run of success, there's no guarantee that success is going to be ongoing.
That's right.
You might have a run for a while, and then next thing you know, you're playing the ever smaller venues and ever smaller guarantees and stuff like that. So I think it's a tough live being a musician for sure. And I think what makes another thing I've talked about in this podcast, I'd like to hear your take on this too. I think part of the reason it's so challenging for all artists of all genres these days is there's not any shared culture. There's not any there's not any one conduit to get your music in front of people. There's
that's really
there's
important.
60,000 conduits, and they've all got their little tiny little groups that watch those things. So to try and get enough people to see your stuff, even if you do all the marketing great and you do the great, the YouTube shorts and you do the Instagram reels and you do everything you're supposed to do, post as often as you're supposed to, you're doing that along with 70,000 other people doing the exact same thing.
Totally.
And trying to find that the people, whereas back in the day, you get signed to a label. Okay, cool. We're going to have 3 singles. They're going to be dropping on these dates. We're going to have a video hit MTV at this time.
Totally.
There was radio and there was MTV back then. That's how you found people. Nowadays, there's not any one way.
For sure.
So what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, before I say anything, I want to give a shout out to Russ Solomon and Jim Uri, 2 of these guys who were like pivotal in the music industry. Of course, Russ Solomon, the former passed away, sadly, the founder of Tower Records, where all of us used to go get music throughout the world. Yep. That's what we did on at nights and on the weekends, is we'd go peruse for records. And Jim Uri is a guy that that helped spearhead parts of Columbia Records. Remember when you put the little 12 CDs for a dollar? That was part of his baby.
That's the greatest thing ever, man. I miss those days.
And so what we're talking about is, what I'm hearing from you is we don't have that same galvanized, like centralized place. For a minute and a half, it was the iPods, and being able to go shop through that portal. But we get our content from so many places that there isn't one general place where you can go and maybe cross-pollinate with other genres. Like if I want hip-hop, I'm going to I'm going to get a steady stream of hip-hop fed to me. But I might not get to hear the new Public Enemy track that has Anthrax on it. I might not get to cross over into metal. And so I think that we need more of that. I think we need to have more cross-pollinating with genres and with access to music. That while it's said that we're in this unprecedented era of connectivity, we're often more siloed than we ever used to be.
Oh yeah, the epidemic of loneliness, man. That's,
for sure.
That's why music's more important than ever, right?
For sure.
Like
100%.
Everything we're talking about today.
People can curate their reality. They can curate what music they're exposed to. They can curate what politics they're exposed to. They can curate what kind of television and media they consume. So you don't just happen upon stuff. You have this little bubble you create for yourself.
Right.
And that's the thing, as a person making music and putting it out there, that's the hardest thing, is how do you penetrate that? How do you get people to watch it, because they've got their little sphere of the understanding that they created. It didn't exist even in the early 2000s. That wasn't like that.
Yeah, one of my least favorite phrases that I've heard in the last 15 years is
Post Malone's awesome.
What's that?
Post Malone's awesome.
Well, that one. Well, yeah, but thanks to the developers at Hunt Showdown, I get to murder him on a regular basis.
Cardi B's a genius.
Well, if I played Call of Duty, I could murder Cardi B, but I'm not going to play Call of Duty because I don't care.
I honestly don't understand the escalation from Aretha Franklin to Cardi B. I don't know how that pathway.
I don't know.
What disrespect to Aretha Franklin even in the same sentence?
No. I know. You know what I'm saying?
It's money.
We went from Marvin Gaye to I'm just saying that there's that the quality of our music needs to improve. And
I think
it's on each one of us to do it.
Well, I was on this podcast before, but the first time I ever was just completely dumbfounded as I was listening to a Cardi B song, and I remember thinking, like, I don't even know what this is. There's no melody.
Well,
there's no
what it is,
it's like a drum loop and some drunk chick rambling incoherently over the top of it. You know what I mean? It's like,
I get
and this is her big single. I'm like, what does that? What's the album cut sound like? Oh my god!
Because that's easy and cheap to produce.
I guess
if you can popularize lower quality art, then you're gonna have access to more lower quality artists, and then you can.
We're really riding the edge of sounding like Annie Rooney right now, right?
I know.
We're really pushing that up. So
I was kind of aiming for Mickey Rooney. I take offense to that. Damn it.
That's okay.
But on the upside,
maybe Art Rooney, the guy that owns the Steelers.
There is something. There is another way to look at this, and we may want to consider it. Is that some of this mainstream crass kind of like, for lack of a better way of putting it, is junk,
non-music
that's being put out. Can you imagine if like Black Flag or 7 Seconds or Suicidal Tendencies had broken in the mainstream back in the 80s and early 90s? Like if real punk rock was promoted, not the
Blink-182, Green
not
Day
that
stuff.
guy.
Green Day
and
is
no
not
disrespect to those guys, but I'm just saying it's a completely different genre than the CD clubs that we used to go to.
Okay, well, punk was also a cultural movement, right?
I get it, but I'm trying to draw the parallel to a lot of this modern hip hop with the crass vocals and the nasty whatever. that is almost like the punk rock of the day. This stuff.
The difference is that punk rock was played by musicians, though. That's the difference. Whatever.
For sure,
I
but
don't know
ethos,
what they are, but they're not musicians. You know what I mean? It's,
yes and no. I mean, listen, I've been to plenty of punk rock shows over at like
no, not punk. I'm talking about like the Cardi B's of the world. You know what I mean? That kind
but
of,
what I'm saying is that if you take the average punk guitar player from the 80s who was just grinding away, like you would not put him in the same category as an Yngwie Malmsteen or whatever, who really knew their craft. So what I'm saying is that the Cardi B's and some of this that we might consider like terrible music, they may be hacking their way through it, but the ethos is almost the same. I'm just going to drive this obnoxious point home. So I'm just trying to, not be too Pollyanna about it, but there may be something there that just because I don't really appreciate the craft, or I don't really appreciate the vibe.
There's a reason it's popular.
That's right.
Whatever it is, it's going right over my head.
Well, it's also a visual product.
Yeah,
it's a whole. It's not just the sound.
It's
right
cheap
now
to produce, but the video costs $2 million.
Well, but does it?
Yeah, I mean, probably.
I mean, I don't know if it does. I mean.
Well,
so.
Look, to your point earlier, we are at an unprecedented age of availability of tools. It does put more onus on the artist to be that marketer, to be that like business person. But if you have good, strong people in your camp, you can shift that to them, hopefully, who will have your best interest in mind. Because, the record labels these days, people are hip to the fact that it's a scam.
Right. I mean, record labels.
It's a big scam.
Well, not only that, but they don't have any money anyway. So it's like the big
and that's
ones
why they're trying to pull it
that.
out of Spotify and these other.
But, without those record labels, there's not an A&R guy developing a band.
Nope.
There's none of that either.
Which I'm describing is exactly how every band does it. Every band's a DIY project. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah, and then you have to deliver them a fully fledged product, and then they're going to take most of it.
Yeah,
That's absurd.
cool. I'll take 75% of that. Sweet.
Yeah, thanks for delivering me.
And then the club will take 10% of the merch, and then
thanks for doing all the work.
Your management and your light guys taking their 5%, so you guys can split the other 10.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? And I'm painting that lovely picture for the youth. Hey guys, when you're thinking about picking up a guitar to begin a band,
hey, you know what? Support independent artists and buy from local retailers.
Well, and that's the thing. Most people when they get into this, they because they want to play, they want to have a good time, they want to have fun, they want to have this lifestyle,
love
whatever.
Music,
but really, if you're going to get serious about it, it's a startup company.
Yep.
You're selling a product,
Yep.
and you have the creation of the product, you've got the development of the product, you've got the refinement of it, then you've got the deployment of it, and then you got to get to a market that will actually accept it.
Yep.
So there's multiple ways. The artist these days has to think in multiple levels.
Yeah.
Not just from the creation, but the deployment of it. And that can be challenging, especially for most artists.
Most artists don't get into that for that reason. That's why.
It.
Yeah, I mean, they want to play music. That's
why some of these labels have been able to take advantage of them for decades.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
especially when you get drugs and alcohol and chicks involved, it's a completely.
It's still happening today. I mean, those labels are still making money from Spotify. The artists are still getting nothing essentially. But that money that the labels are making is ever smaller and ever smaller and ever smaller. Eventually, it's going to just go away, and the labels will also go away with it. Everyone's going to be back into this. It's a wild west kind of thing.
I would normally agree with you. My only pushback would be to say that money and power has a tendency to want to try and find a way.
Yeah, well, they had a chance in the early 2000s to find the better way, to avoid all this stuff that we're in now, and they didn't take it. So, I think.
But was it avoidable? I mean, technology kind of guaranteed.
Yeah, because they didn't get out in front of it. They were always 6 steps behind what the technology was. Like, oh wait, the people are downloading. What's that?
I mean, it would just be like
they were downloading on dial-up.
Yeah.
Or DSL.
But they weren't thinking ahead. The people at the labels were stuck in an old model.
I'm just saying, wouldn't we still be sitting here today in the same place?
Fault.
But we had a way to monetize it and control that distribution. If the people had been out in front of it, if they'd understood what the technology was going to be.
Would the record companies have been any more generous than Spotify?
No, but they would
think that people would just be downloading on like Atlantic Records.
Shit rolls downhill though, because people if the labels have no money, that trickles down to the artists having no money and very little ability to actually push their marketing. There's not any way they can do things. If the labels were still monetized like they were back in the 80s, there would still be an opportunity for artists to get signed and get their music. They would still get ripped off either way.
Right, there'd be like the top 1 or 2%, but like if you sold your CD for $20, the artist is still only going to get pennies on
for sure,
right? Maybe 10 cents.
But that's not what you're buying in that situation. When you're buying in that situation, is the opportunity to get supported for a period of time while you're building who your band is. That's going to pay off in the long run, not the short run.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so if you have like we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, like if you were like Britney Fox or Pretty Boy Floyd or one of those bands, right?
Britney Fox is an underrated band
like those bands. I'm just saying, like, if
They're really good.
If they got a
like
single
Britney
on
Fox.
MTV for like 2 singles, let's say, they had 2 songs on MTV back in the 80s for rotation for a year. They're still making money in 2025 based off that. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, sure.
nowadays you can make a video for the cheap and put it out. You'll get some people seeing it, but it doesn't really help you in the long
Right.
run. It's not
Yep.
monetized something 30 years from now that you're going to be able to capitalize on now. You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah, I want to go back to a point that I think that the record companies not getting out in front of the technology is largely their own fault.
Of course. Yeah.
Because they really sort of harangued us into and most of us Gen Xers really feel it because we started with records,
Yeah.
Yep.
8
Tapes,
tracks,
yeah.
Cassette
cassettes,
tapes, yep.
and then CDs, and then by the like, I am not buying this catalog for the 5th time.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's not going to happen. And so, you know, like I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, one of my best friends, you know, in the 2007, 2008, where I was like, dude, we need a Netflix for music. Like, if I want to hear Pink Floyd The Wall, and I've already purchased it, it doesn't matter to me whether I listen to it on my phone or I listen to it in my car or listen to it in the shower or whatever. Like, I just want access to it. And why should I have to take a disc and put it into a separate player? Like, and we were talking about it, and then within a year or so, Spotify came out. So it was like one of these things of like you know, some of us, and I'm not just trying to pat myself on the back, because there's many people who are you know within a step or two of where the market's going. It's a shame that the record companies weren't like out in front of it a little bit more. But again, I think it's their own fault because they just manipulated the way the market went leading up to the digital revolution.
I think they overestimated their own their own model too. They thought they had more control than they did.
Totally,
You know what I mean?
and it collapsed almost overnight.
Yep. Well, the same thing happened to a lot of musicians' ability to actually make money off the records happened overnight. That whole thing changed. I mean, the bands that had a big enough name that they could go out and tour and get good enough guarantees and sell enough merch to make a living still are doing it. But now the mid-level, low-level bands are even struggling in that because the venues are trying to stay alive too. So they're taking some of the merch too. A lot of, I can tell you from, because I have a bunch of friends, I just signed deals recently, that the labels are demanding part of the merch too. So not only are you having to give the label the money that you're going to give them anyway, they're taking part of the merch for the live too, and the venue's taking part of the merch too.
But
I mean,
so to flip this around a little bit, I think the good news is that if you want to get into the industry and you want to play music, start with your own your own craft and getting really good at that. The next thing is to work with other people, develop connectivity. I'm a big proponent of the 1 + 1 = 3. In other words, one person whole and complete doing their stuff and becoming a whole artist, and a second person whole and complete as a good artist. The two of them together can make a third thing that's even bigger.
You just described Ex Aegis.
that's true. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely
So
right.
you start there, and I think the one thing that is universal is that that things will resonate with people. So all you really have to do is invest some time into your own craft, work with someone else, create things that resonate for you. Don't worry about how it really affects or is in the marketplace. There are other people who you can work with that will get you in there.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
As an artist, you have no other choice really than to do what you're describing.
That's
you have
right.
to just make
Hey,
it yours. You know
that's
what I mean?
right.
Music is best when it's a team sport.
That's true.
100%.
And I think we proved that today on our podcast.
That's true. I mean, for sure, as we've done, since the day one of this podcast, actually. But now it's even better. Very
With
insightful, Rich. I'm
Man,
telling you, man.
we got to have you back, man. This was a great episode.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Found
Yeah,
of
thank
information,
you.
and we love your perspective, man. It's really, really
Thanks.
cool. And I mean, we're all of similar age, so we kind of have that
Yes.
same thing.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
see what you mean about like the complaining about the new stuff, but it's like, when you've been around a while, you kind of realize that, dude, like it's way lamer now.
Yeah, well, they said that about they said that about our stuff in the 80s.
Yeah, but they were wrong.
And hey, these days, if you really want to make money with music, you can buy a share of Spotify. It's up 26% year to date.
Hey, you know what I want them to do is
fuckers.
make money on music by going to Ex Aegis' website at xaegisband.com.
You can enrich yourself by
Yes.
going to www.exaegisband.com.
There you'll find links to our social media. Make sure to follow us on social media. And while you're thinking about new music, you can always come and check out Scott Allen Project's newest album, Maximum Threshold, which is out available right now. Any place you get digital music, downloaded or streamed. You can also find that at scottallenprojectband.com. Rich, anything you want to put for your band?
Noose?
Yeah, you can look up Noose, as in N-U-S. You can look up Noose Art Media, both on Facebook and on Instagram. And you can also go to richkaz.com, which is an antiquated website, but I'll rebuild it. But I will have,
we have the technology. We can rebuild it.
And we are rebuilding the Noose website as we speak. But we've got some new stuff in the works, and just keep tabs on us on social media, and we'll let you know when we're playing.
All right,
Rad.
guys.
Well, we'll have to have you back on when you guys have a new release, and we'll promote
Break it down,
and the whole
all that
nine
stuff.
yards.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
Hell yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Until next time, peace.